One of the reasons, beyond our long-standing friendship and brotherhood, that from the United Nations perspective, this visit was absolutely necessary as well. Pakistan is a member of the Group of 77 and China, Non-Aligned Movement, and the Organization of Islamic Countries. And it is not just being a member to these groups, it is an active member where everybody looks what Pakistan is proposing or doing in order to move in these groups. Also, Pakistan makes extensive and substantial contributions to the United Nations work in all its pillars, including peace operations. And I'm looking forward to close cooperation with Pakistan in my term as the President of the United Nations General Assembly. I have chosen a distinguished Pakistani diplomat as my Deputy Chief of Cabinet, and I'm confident that with his extensive experience in UN issues, Ambassador Farooq Khan will make substantial contribution to the work of my office and the 75th session of the General Assembly. I'm also looking forward to a fruitful and close cooperation with Pakistan's permanent representative in New York, Ambassador Munir Akram, a good friend and very able diplomat, who is currently the President of the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. So the agendas of these two decision-making bodies out of four, namely the President of the General Assembly, Security Council, Secretary General, and ECOSOC. These are the four pillars of the United Nations decision-making and progress-making system, and we have to see that these institutions and bodies not contradict but complement each other and avoid any overlapping in their agendas. So we will try to harmonize the essential work of these four organs, but having Ambassador Munir Akram on top of the ECOSOC will make life very much easier and to establish the coordination. Today I have called on His Excellency the Prime Minister, Imran Khan. I was very much honored and impressed about our discussion. He's a well-known political figure in the world, and I think he has a vision for the region and for the world peace and security, and also with important issues the world is dealing, like the climate change or reaching to the countries in difficulty, least developed countries, landlocked countries, small countries, island countries, Asian countries, African countries. I think we are looking to the same direction, that the United Nations role must be more towards the countries in need than the countries which can do without the United Nations. So as the PGA, I have mentioned many times that even though I have been endorsed by the Western European Group and others, Turkey is also a member of the Asian and Pacific Group, but Turkey is also has a more global role where we can have a larger dimension in our priorities and projects. So I have seen that the Prime Minister, together with Minister Qureshi, same direction, keeping the look at these countries and create a new vision or realize what has been decided already. So that will be, I think, very important during this 1 year to also increase the credibility of the United Nations as well. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations Foundation, which constitutes a historic occasion to reaffirm our collective commitment to multilateralism. And I think multilateralism is the key word. And I think without multilateralism, we can't have United Nations or any international fora. So first thing to do is to give a chance to multilateralism at the General Assembly platform, and to give a chance to countries to present their voice, their problems, their difficulties, so that everybody can listen and understand, and then it will be much easier to deliver. Of course, we are currently facing with serious immediate problems in different parts of the world, including humanitarian crisis and deadly conflicts. And now we're facing also a unprecedented global challenge, which is the pandemic. And COVID-19 is first and foremost a health emergency, but it is also a threat, political and economic consequences, as well as human rights repercussions. So on this occasion, I would like to extend my condolences for Pakistan's losses caused by the pandemic and wish a swift recovery for the patients. But I think Pakistan has been a good example for the world with its policies which handled the pandemic-related policies very well, and it is one of the figures show that Pakistan has done better than many other countries in the world, and I'm happy to observe it also here with my own eyes. I think the pandemic proved once again that common problems require common responses. And in our collective response to the pandemic, we must focus on the special needs of the most vulnerable across the three pillars of the United Nations. I think restoring people's faith in international institutions, especially with the UN at their center, is also crucial in the face of challenges caused by COVID-19. And UN General Assembly has a central role to play in this global fight against pandemic and safeguarding multilateralism. This is why I have been long and loudly advocating that the General Assembly should resume its normal functioning with meetings in person while taking appropriate protections for the health. And I think this has to be also coordinated with the local authorities for the earliest return of the UN to normalcy. And first thing I will do when I go to New York is to contact with the governor and the mayor to explain them that UN is New York and New York is UN. And while you're opening museums, streets, Central Park, warehouses, construction sites, it is absolutely necessary that the UN starts functioning as well. This 3 months, 4 months period, I think was a blow on the credibility of the United Nations. While people needed the United Nations stayed at home with virtual meetings and with decisions without a voting. And I think we must really bring the United Nations back to life with this high-level week, with it must be a glorious return, physical meetings with the participation of civil society, stakeholders, specialists, leaders from countries, so that the world must believe again that UN is alive. Otherwise, if it goes on like this, we can really start losing the United Nations, and we don't have the luxury to have this kind of a situation. So that is why I have, as the President-elect, in a way, entered into the decision-making process very strongly, and as it looks now, the General Assembly will meet physically, and there is no restrictions for leaders or country representatives to to participate unless there is a big change in the health conditions in September. So we will evaluate in September on whether to recommend leaders from countries to be present or pass it to their representatives in New York. But we must first see the situation in September, and I'm sure that as the schools are opening and things are looking better, we will have a chance to see representatives of countries, the level of leaders or foreign ministers. Some of them might be there. So these were the remarks I wanted to share with you. Of course, being here with two hats is a pleasure and honor, but also makes life a little bit difficult because as a Turkish citizen or brother from Turkey, my hands are very, very large. I can do anything I want. But as the PGA, there are some rules which we have to obey, and especially respecting the impartiality rule. That is why some of my statements might be restricted to the necessities coming from this impartiality rule, but I will never forget that I'm a Turkish citizen and a brother of Pakistan in that respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We can now take some questions. So my request would be if you could kindly first introduce yourself, your media outlet, and also indicate to whom your question is addressed to. Shaukat Pracha, some of whom you I know, and the rest I look forward to knowing. Shaukat Pracha, please.
Thank you, Mr. Spokesman. Since you are conducting first time, we also welcome you here. Your rich experience, your wider exposure, and your extensive diplomatic expertise will also benefit all of us. My question to Honorable visiting President-elect of the UNGA is that you are welcome here in Pakistan in the month of August, and this month India was partitioned, Pakistan and India became two countries, and in this month the unfinished agenda of the partition is still pending, which is dispute of Jammu and Kashmir. How do you see the role of United Nations, particularly the United Nations General Assembly, in resolution of the Jammu dispute? And my question to Honorable Foreign Minister is, when UN Secretary General was here, and he was here after the 5th August last year, he did not condone the measures taken by the Indian government of last 5th August. So world body is responding to Pakistan, to the Kashmiris. How you plan to keep it up that one day the Kashmiris will get the justice and get their rights? Thank you.
As I have mentioned previously, the President of the United Nations General Assembly impartially represents the United Nations membership as a whole. Turkey's position regarding the issue of Kashmir is well known and expressed at every level by the Turkish government. And on the 5th of August, again, there was a strong statement made by the Foreign Ministry. However, the position of the United Nations on this region is governed by its charter and applicable Security Council resolutions, as it was previously expressed by the United Nations Secretary General during his visit or during other occasions. So there is also the 1972 Simla Agreement between India and Pakistan, which states that the final status of Jammu and Kashmir is to be settled by peaceful means in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. Resolving the dispute over Jammu and Kashmir is key to sustainable peace in the South Asia. And regional security should be maintained through political and diplomatic solutions. Difficult challenges can be resolved peacefully and satisfactorily through meaningful mutual engagement. Today, during our talks, my brother, the Foreign Minister, and the Prime Minister presented their position and approach to this issue. It was, even from this perspective, it was worth coming here to hear with my own ears and to see with my own eyes how the situation is, and to understand it much better, so that when it comes to the United Nations level, it will not be by reading notes, but getting the impressions of the brother Pakistani people face to face. So if my assistance as the President of the General Assembly is requested by the parties, I would be ready to provide a contribution within my mandate.
Zargun Shah from Geo.
Can I just respond to Parati Sahab? Parati Sahab, besides being the chief diplomat of Pakistan, I also happen to be an elected representative of the people. I mince no words in front of the President-elect, highlighting the situation, the grave situation in Jammu and Kashmir. A situation and the unilateral actions that can threaten peace and security of this region. I don't want to dilate further on that, but everything that had to be shared was shared honestly with the President-elect. The Prime Minister also elaborated or went further, and I can assure you and the media of Pakistan that we conveyed the sentiments of the people of Pakistan to the President-elect. You are aware that the Security Council has deliberated on the Jammu and Kashmir dispute 3 times in 1 year, which is unprecedented, and we are grateful. But the General Assembly is the Parliament of the world, and as the President of the General Assembly, I would do whatever I can to collect other countries, to present to the President-elect the need for a discussion on the dispute of Jammu and Kashmir in the General Assembly, because that is the pulse of the world. Security Council has its significance and importance, undoubtedly. But that forum, the General Assembly of the United Nations, is a different forum. And that is the forum that highlights the views of the Committee of Nations. So that would be one of my desires, if I can achieve that. The President-elect has very clearly said, and I completely respect that, that if you need and if we desire for a sustainable peace in this region, then the issue of Jammu and Kashmir has to be addressed. The people of Jammu and Kashmir are not just disturbed, they are very concerned about the demographic taking place there.
Thank you. Zargun Shah from GOT.
Thank you, sir. This is Zargun Shah from Geo Television here. My question to the Foreign Minister is that Pakistan recently issued its political map. I would like to ask the Foreign Minister, would you like to elaborate on Pakistan's principal position on Junagadh, because India forcibly occupied and annexed Junagadh also. Thank you. And secondly, my question to the Honorable Mr. BOZKIR is that what will be your role, being the President-elect of the UN General Assembly, to bring the Ummah to a single platform? Thank you.
want me to go first? On the question of launching the political map of Pakistan, I can share with you, and has been said before, that this map reflects the aspirations of the people of Pakistan. And through this map, we have incorporated in this map the will of the people by saying where Pakistan stands on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, what is our position vis-a-vis Siachen, what is our position vis-a-vis Sir Creek, and our position on Junagadh is amply clear. If we look at the principles of partition, then Junagadh and the accession, where it should have belonged.
And to the question asked to me, I think it's the PGA's role is to have every group, every voice to have a chance to be reflected. But of course, it works not from the PGA to the General Assembly, but it works from the General Assembly to the PGA. So when I'm in New York, of course, any need will be evaluated, and I will look favorably to any request which I see that must be treated positively. So as of now, I can say this. While working there together with my right-hand ambassador, Farouk, we will also look into these necessities and decide on the priorities and the calendar, and if it is possible or not, of course. But there are groups also in the United Nations, the Islamic group, the Arab group, the Asian group, so they have a power of creating the public opinion or the UN opinion. And I will have breakfast meetings with limited number of ambassadors every week, 1 or 2, 3, 4 times. So this will let me understand what is the wind blowing, and sometimes get their vision, or also give them some ideas that they could perhaps exchange with others to make it possible.
जी शुमाइला अंदलीब जी.
Thank you. Shumaila Andalib, Associated Press of Pakistan. Given the recent developments in the region, what are the specific areas that Pakistan is going to highlight at the upcoming session of UNGA in New York? And secondly, are you going to participate in this session? Thank you.
Well, I have shared my views and my recommendation to the Prime Minister would be that we should participate. I believe physical participation means a lot more than a virtual engagement. You can convey more, you can feel more, and you can be better understood while you're physically there. And this is the 75th session. So it's an important session. It's not a normal, usual session. It's a historic session. So I would encourage Pakistan to physically participate in that session. On the priorities, I said there are a number of issues that I have just touched on. Obviously, the most important priorities are the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. This is an issue which is on the agenda of the UN, cannot be overlooked, should not be overlooked. You cannot wish away, even if you want to. So this will keep simmering till it is addressed. The issue of debt relief for the developing countries is equally important, because the developing countries is facing the challenge, the twin challenge of saving lives with a fragile healthcare system and dealing with the economic situation because of the global contraction and the recession, bordering the Great Depression of the 30s. How do we protect these very, very indebted, vulnerable countries? The Secretary General has taken some initiative. We are grateful to the G20 countries. They have helped, but we feel, Pakistan feels, more needs to be done. Thirdly, the issue of climate change. The Prime Minister has been talking about yesterday, while encouraging tree plantations in Pakistan. The Prime Minister spoke elaborately on how important environment change and climate change, the impact it has had on our wheat production, for example. And we primarily are an agrarian economy. Illicit financial flows. How loot and plunder and siphoning off money through corruption in the third world developing countries has impoverished the people of these countries. How important this is, and how do we need flow of money out of countries like Pakistan. And Islamophobia. The world has seen, and the world has reacted, particularly in the US, to racism. When George Floyd was, killed, the way he was killed, there was a spontaneous reaction to that. I personally feel that the OIC countries must join hands and speak up, because Islam is being portrayed and Muslims are being targeted. Hate speech and new ideologies have risen. Ideologies that made the world suffer, like the fascist ideology. Today we see new ideologies. The ideologies being propagated by extremist, fundamentalist organizations like the RSS are of concern. And I think there has to be a clear message from the UN system on how to deal with hate speech and Islamophobia. So these are some of the priorities that Pakistan would like to highlight in the coming UN session.
So we can take one last question. Ji Mateen Haider.
This is Mateen Haider representing GTV Network. A question to UNGA President-elect, Excellency. You have talked about credibility of United Nations and being the President-elect of UNGA. So you also spoke about impartiality. So how would you like to make comment that there are United Nations Military Observer Group on India and Pakistan, which is a very vital department that monitors situation in Jammu and Kashmir and particularly line of control violations. Pakistan has permitted that group number of times to visit line of control and collect the facts. But continuously India is blocking United Nations Military Observers Group visit to their part of the line of control. So this is the biggest UN violation. It's an official group created by the United Nations. I think even if you keep the impartiality, so definitely there has to be comment. How would you like to make your voice while sitting at UNGA President to make this United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan more stronger, so that they can independently report the situation over there, particularly India's violations at the line of control and continuous targeting of civilians inside Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which is also a great human rights violation. And question to Mr. Foreign Minister. Mr. Foreign Minister, you have highlighted the priorities. Indeed, these will be definitely discussed, but how would you like to make comment as an independent comment that with the passage of time, we have seen United Nations has lost its effectiveness when it comes to the Indian occupied Kashmir situation. So what are your comments to make UN more effective as far as Indian occupied Kashmir is there? We have seen your zeal, your enthusiasm as far as human rights violation, but UNBC is not playing that effective role. Thank you.
First, I'm still the president-elect. I will take office on the 15th of September. So I think the better way is not to make any comments now. And to, when taking the office, we will have coordination meetings with the Security Council, the Secretary General, and also with ambassadors there. And I think it will be much better, after understanding the situation, to make remarks or to propose initiatives. At this moment, I don't think I have the right to make any statements where, in a situation which I do not control.
Mr. McLean, Heather, let me comment on that. And my view is that UNMOGIP has the mandate of the Security Council. And their mandate is very clear, to ensure peace and security. Pakistan has given the observers on our side of at the LOC the freedom to ensure, to share and report. Unfortunately, on the other side, they have been, I would say, obstructed from performing their responsibilities. That is why Pakistan is articulating that the role of UNMOGIP must be strengthened. At a time when the intensification of violations and ceasefire violations is growing, we saw 2019, the numbers were very high, and this year, to 2020, already we've had 1845 violations so far, and we have some months to travel. So that is very clear. On the role the UN can play, the UN must play its role. It cannot overlook the role. Because if the global leaders want to address the issues of peace and security, if they want to promote stability, if they want this region to develop, how will it develop? How will we attract investments? How will we ensure regional trade, regional connectivity, when this very issue, which has been looming and lingering for years, is not addressed? A point has come where this issue needs to be addressed. And if it's not, and if this wound keeps bleeding, unfortunately, peace and security of the region will get disturbed. And not just the region, it will have implications that go far beyond the region. But across the LOC are two nuclear powers, and Kashmir has become a flashpoint. God forbid, if things spin out of control, the world will be sucked into that situation. Before that happens, the world and the UN must act responsibly and act now.
Thank you very much, sir. And this brings us to the closure of this press takeout. I thank you very much for your participation.
वज़ीर ख़ारिजा शाह महमूद कुरैशी और नौमुंतखब सदर जनरल असम्बली वोल्कन बोज़किर की इस्लामाबाद में न्यूज़ कॉन्फ्रेंस। पाकिस्तान का दौरा करना मेरे लिए खुशी का बाइस है। पाकिस्तान का अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा में मुतहर्रिक किरदार है, कहा गया नौमुंतखब सदर जनरल असम्बली वोल्कन बोज़किर की जानिब से। वज़ीर ख़ारिजा ने इस मौके पर कहा कि वोल्कन बोज़किर को भारतीय गैर कानूनी मकबूजा जम्मू कश्मीर की सूरत हाल से आगाह किया है और जनरल असम्बली के आइंदा इजलास के एजेंडे और कोरोना की सूरत हाल पर भी गुफ्तगू हुई है। और मुश्तरका न्यूज़ कॉन्फ्रेंस अब से कुछ देर पहले जारी थी और नौमुंतखब सदर की जानिब से कहा गया कि पाकिस्तान अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा का अहम रुकन मुल्क है। पाकिस्तान का अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा में मुतहर्रिक किरदार है।